Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at Roger Deakin's Blade Runner. Roger Deakins is considered to be one of the best cinematographers of all time, so I think it'd be important to try to analyze how he's lighting these frames and to see what we can learn. Once again, it's important to note that these images are post-grade, so there's a little bit of extrapolation as to whether or not they were exposed exactly this way on set by Roger Deakins, but there's still something we can take away from analyzing the images. All right, so the first thing I want to do with this image is throw on the false color, take a look at the general latitude, the range of values that we're dealing with, and just like most of the images we've looked at on this channel, we notice that most of the image is sitting about 5 stops below middle gray. What we can say generally is that most of the image is sitting near 0 IRE, sitting near black. The brightest point of the image is the window to the right, lighting Dave Bautista. So it's anywhere between 3 to 4 stops above middle gray. So if we're looking at how Roger Deakins is getting the two characters here to pop, obviously they're just silhouetting them against the brightest points of the image. If your subject isn't going to be the brightest point, then it needs to be silhouetted by the brightest point. If you moved Ryan Gosling, the character on the left, if you moved him too far to the right or too far to the left, too far forward, you're gonna lose him completely. You're not gonna be able to see him. With this image here, I wanna highlight something that I think is really interesting and helps develop texture and layers in an image. Starting at the left side of the frame, appears to be a strong vignette going from dark, very left of the frame, to slightly lighter, and then a strong highlight on the skull, back to mid-tone, back to pure black, and then just on the right side of the skull, back to bright, and then onto Jared Leto's face, bright, mid-tone, dark, back over his right shoulder, highlight. It's just a constant evolution of bright to dark, bright to dark, bright to dark. And then if we flick on false color, we see once again the same with all of these images. They're always pushed down to black. There's always the presence of black in the image with a gradual transition up to middle gray or 1 stop above middle gray, potentially 2 stops above middle gray. But what's interesting is if you're looking at this in false color, going from purple to blue. And then the same thing with this image, a lot of silhouetting being done here. If you don't want to make your subject the brightest part, you got to put a light on the background, something that's going to pull them out of the background, separate them so that the eyes still go to them. Same thing with this image. I want to talk about how the composition draws your eye to him. The strongest ping of light is on the left side of his head, frame left, the right side of his head, that glistening spot on his forehead. Compositionally, all the kids' heads are framed almost in the bottom of a pyramid up to him. So the eyes are drawn to him. All the hands are leading up to his head. And then in order to keep him from spilling into the background on his right side of his head, frame right, they have a nice hair light coming in from the back so that he doesn't fall into the pure black like the background is, about 5 stops below middle gray, which we can see in the false color representation. The overhead lights are sitting 1, 2, maybe 3 stops above middle gray, which if we look at that strong ping on his right side of the forehead, it is also sitting about 2 to 3 stops above middle gray. And then almost like the frames we were looking at from Beasts of No Nation, this frame is really interesting because of how dark the image is and how selective the light is hitting the subjects in the scene. A lot of this is being helped by the fact that everything on set is a dark brown, it's black, all the costuming is black or dark brown. So a lot of the walls are soaking up the light that's being thrown in. And so there's not a lot of room tone, there's not a lot of ambience being developed from the lights that are being shot into the room. It's all being soaked up by these dark or black walls. And then it really helps that these patches of light are almost in a diagonal straight toward Ryan Gosling's character's face. We can see, if I take my mouse here, this light up here, and then it goes straight here, and then straight to his head, and then down here. And it almost helps that this beam opens up kind of like this, as if your eye is meant to go from here, opens up down to his head. All right, so this is the last image we're gonna look at. I just wanna talk about the natural vignette that's being created by having the camera be placed where it is. And also the blocking of these two characters help create more contrast and draw your eye to them. So compositionally, the camera is set pretty far back into the shadow, and then everything in the frame helps draw your eye to the two subjects sitting down against that back window. If you look at all the chairs and the positioning of everything in the frame, it's all pointed toward them. That really helps. If this chair on frame left, if it were pointing toward the outside of the frame, then your eye would wander to the outside of the frame, but everything is pointed directly toward them. The person over here reading is also angled toward them, so everything in the frame is pointed right to them. And then once again, if you look at the set, everything is dark wood. There's lots of carpets being hung up. They look dark red, dark yellow. So there's a consistency in the color palette. If you look at the clothes on the person reading the book over there, it's dark yellow. And then if you look at, I guess this is supposed to be a heater. I'm not sure. It's also dark yellow. You look here, dark yellow. But there's a consistency in the color palette being developed in the wardrobing and also the set decorating. But if you look at the way that a lot of contrast is developed in this image, it comes down to the fact that dark woods, there's not pure white walls, because then you'd get so much bounce, and these big windows would light up the entire room, and it would eliminate that natural vignette that you're getting, which really helps draw your eye to the two subjects. And then, just for fun, if we cut on the false color, we see, once again, most of the image is sitting in black. If most of your room had pure white walls, what you could do, which wouldn't be as good as this, but what you could do is throw a lot of negative fill. And then the positioning of them, obviously they're sitting up high enough and the camera is positioned at such an angle that their faces are against those white windows in the background. That helps create more contrast. If that window pane were just a little bit higher and their faces were against the dark wood behind them, they wouldn't pop out quite as much. So that's also something compositionally that's happening that they're doing. And that's something that you should take note of as well as you're walking through your set, doing location scouts. All right, so that's gonna be everything for today. Hopefully there's a couple of takeaways you can learn from studying these images. Mainly, it's important to look at the location you're at, figure out if it's gonna be conducive to a high contrast, low contrast, high key, low key style of lighting. Figure out where you can place your subject in the frame to create a more balanced frame. Thank you so much for watching, and if there's a movie you would like for me to take a look at, leave it down in the comments below.